listener production.
Hey, Benzion Siebert here with The Briefing. AI is coming for the Australian music industry. Whether that's a catastrophe or a creative revolution, or both, or somewhere in between, is yet to be seen. But this week, we did get some answers. Music licensing lobby group APRA AMCOS released this massive report surveying thousands of musicians across Australia and New Zealand. And it's a real mixed bag. On the one hand, economic modelling in the report finds AI is likely to wipe more than $500 million off the revenues of music creators by 2028. On the other hand, it finds that more than half of the musicians and producers surveyed for the report said AI technology can help with the human creative process. Today on The Briefing, we hear from Australian singer-songwriters Josh Pyke and Gordi, aka Sophie Payton, on the promise and the threat of AI for Australian music. Josh Pyke, welcome to The Briefing. This report says AI could do $500 million in damage to the Australian music industry in the next 4 years. How?
How? Well, that's a good question. I mean, the main thing is by removing work for practicing artists and songwriters and musicians that are currently working in the market. So if you can imagine the very realistic scenario that somebody wants to create a song in the style of, say, Josh Pyke or Sarah Blasko, Jimmy Barnes, all of these people, they can give the prompt and AI can do that, and then people can monetize the output of those AI models. And so that money is not going to the artists that created the work that had trained the generative AI models. And realistically, that money is pretty much going to go flow back to the top 3 tech companies. So it's not like a amazing altruistic sort of democratization of creativity either.
Lots of AI models are already trained on the music that's available on the internet. Has the horse bolted on copyright for these works, or is there some way that artists could claw it back?
I think the horse is bolted in the sense that people are going to continue to create this technology, and certainly people are going to continue to use it. The study also showed that a huge proportion of creatives are interested in using AI to help them in the creative process. The issue is that at the moment, they're trained on the history of human creativity and nobody's being remunerated for it. There's no transparency around it and there's no real consent, so you can't opt out of these things. So in terms of clawing it back, it's really the government's job to step in really, really quickly and figure out how to legislatively protect our copyright. I think in terms of the creation of AI models and the use of AI in our everyday lives, that horse is bolted. And I'm not, I welcome that. I think that's, as long as people are being properly remunerated for the use of their work, then that's fine.
Music has obviously survived enormous technological change over decades and decades. Recently, I guess, auto-tune sampling, not that recent maybe. But is AI any different? Could we look back in 10 years and say that the fears about this were overblown?
Only if we do something about it now. I mean, sampling is a good example. If somebody hadn't put their foot down, the artists that have been sampled countless times in tracks, if they hadn't put their feet down and said, well, this is actually my work and I deserve to be remunerated for its use, and I at least need to be asked for consent for its use, and that record labels and artists that were sampling them are transparent about it. If none of that had happened, then we would be looking back on that now and saying, what an exploitation of people's creative works. So I think we'll look back in 10 years and say, wow, it's lucky we got that under control, because that could have been a complete disaster for the creative industries. That is not to say that we're anti-innovation, particularly creators. Embracing of technology is kind of what we're all about. Like if you think about, examples that you might take for granted, like the synthesizer, the electric guitar, computers to create music and record music. Like we're always at the forefront of embracing innovation. The problem is if it starts to eat away at the very core of what we do, that's where the real issue comes in. If you're going to train an AI model on the history of human created music, then those humans need transparency, consent and remuneration. It's really as simple as that. I can't really see how anybody would argue with that. And the thing is that governments are often a bit scared of sounding anti-innovation, so they are a little bit slow to react to these things because they don't want to be seen as sort of being anti-innovation or really heavily censorious. And in this instance, we're already behind the eight ball. We really need to move on this stuff.
Josh Pyke there. Singer-songwriter Gordi, real name Sophie Payton, joins us. Sophie, have you experimented with using AI in your process for making music?
Yes, I have. I use a software called Logic, which a lot of artists use to get demos up and running. And often I just sit down and write a song on guitar, but sometimes as a different kind of creative process, I start the actual songwriting on the computer. And there's an AI drummer that lives inside Logic that I use sometimes to just kind of get a beat up and running that, eventually I'll probably swap out of the song, but it can be a really easy, fast, accessible tool to spur on your own creativity.
This APRA AMCOS report that came out this week, it quotes a number of artists. One of them is Missy Higgins, and she says, most music is driven from the heart, not the head, and I don't think artificial feelings can stir the soul. Is there a way in which AI could fundamentally undermine the humanity of music in a way that other technologies don't?
Yes, is the short answer. I think I read that quote from Missy as well and thought that really hit the nail on the head. I agree with it in that I'm sitting at my computer right now writing a song and there's little mistakes in there, like I can hear in one of the recordings I made, there's a car horn in it. And I'm leaving it in there because it adds this kind of, accidental humanity to the track and it gives this sense of time and place. And, AI is not going to have those kind of happy, interesting accidents. But I think the most frightening thing about AI for an artist is theft of intellectual property. So that is kind of, what keeps me and most artists up at night when we think about AI, the idea that someone's going to type into a computer, hey, I want to make a song like Gordi. And then in 3 minutes, they've done it. And that's, in 3 minutes, they've taken what's been my entire lifetime of accruing skills and understanding and honing, instincts. And that is terrifying. And I think that's where government and legislation needs to sort of step up and step in to protect that intellectual property for artists and future generations.
Do you think there's a sense in which it could sort of eat itself in that if you get AI creating AI music, then the whole thing could just kind of fall apart and ruin the industry?
I think to a degree, and I think that culture moves in waves and, we've seen it even with social media where when Instagram first started, you'd upload a photo and you'd, filter it to the nth degree to kind of make it this more beautiful version of yourself. And we've seen sort of the antithesis of that in, what the word on everyone's lips at the moment, brat, which is almost this real countercultural, it's kind of one example, or our obsession with, film photos, or we sort of, as we get closer and closer to this kind of perfection, we want to shrink back from it. And I think it's that sort of, the uncanny valley of it all, where it's like if something is really close to real, but it's not real, there's something inside us as people where we don't like that.
Can AI help artists climb that huge mountain of getting massive on TikTok or Spotify or Apple Music?
I think this is where I'm most interested in AI, which is solving the problems that we have in the industry. So the biggest problem in the Australian music industry at the moment, and for, indie artists worldwide, is discoverability. So someone's on their Spotify algorithm, they listen to one song by whichever artist, and then what's coming up time after time is Sabrina Carpenter, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, and you're kind of losing that, the discoverability that maybe existed on radio or those sorts of channels that are, people seem to be veering away from. So there's a real focus at the moment, I know, from streaming services on mood playlists. That seems to really be appealing to people. So, and they're getting so specific, like you can type in sad girl, too much thinking Thursday morning. And it's, AI is creating some unique playlist just for you and your specific mood. And I think that there's an opportunity there to sort of capitalize on that. Playlists coming from sort of text descriptions and more intricate ways of kind of curating those playlists. I don't know the answer, but there's some opportunity there to help solve our discoverability problem where, exactly as you've said, it can sort of help indie artists climb this insurmountable mountain of, building a sustainable career.
Gordi, aka Sophie Payton there. And before her, Australian singer-songwriter Josh Pyke. That's it for this episode of The Briefing. If there's someone in your life you think might enjoy this ep, please share a link with them. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube, just search Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow from 6 a.m. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.